Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Om Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jaya Virya Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nitram Bhagavad Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jai Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jai Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. We all. Bhagwan Sarva Bhuteshu
Bhagavan Sarvabhutesu
Lakshita Swatmana Hari
Lakshita
Lakshita
Swatmana
Swatmana
Hari.
Hari
Drishya Buddhi Adibhir Drishta
Drishya Buddhya
Drishe Buddhi
Adidrishta.
Adhirishta
Lakshaner Anuma Pakai.
Lakshane
Chane
Anumapakaye.
Anumapate.
Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, is in every living being along with the individual soul. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Purport. So we had discussed this yesterday. I'll just quickly go through it, just to revise, and then we'll go forward. The general argument of the common man is that since the Lord is not visible to our eyes, how can one either surrender unto him or render transcendental loving service unto him? To such a common man, here is a practical suggestion given by Srila Sukdev Goswami as to how one can perceive the Supreme Lord by reason and perception. Actually, the Lord is not perceivable by our present materialized senses, but when one is convinced of the presence of the Lord by a practical service attitude, there is revelation of Lord's mercy, and such a pure devotee of the Lord can perceive the Lord's presence always and everywhere. He can perceive that intelligence is the form direction of the Paramatma plenary portion of the personality of Godhead. The presence of Paramatma in everyone's company is not very difficult to realize, even for a common man. The procedure is as follows. One can perceive one's self-identification and feel positively that he exists. He may not feel it very abruptly, but by using a little intelligence, he can feel that he is not the body. He can feel the hand, leg, head, the hair, and the limbs are all his bodily parts and parcels, but as such, the hand, the leg, the head, etc., cannot be identified with the self. Therefore, just by using intelligence, he can distinguish and separate himself from the other things that he sees. So the natural conclusion is that the living being, either man or beast, is the seer, and he sees besides himself all other things. So there is a difference between the seer and the seen. Now, by a little use of intelligence, we can also readily agree that the living being who sees the things beyond himself by ordinary vision has no power to see or move independently. All our actions and perceptions depend on various forms of energy supplied to us by nature in various combinations. our senses of perception and of action, that is to say, our five perceptive senses, hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, as well as our five senses of action, namely the Prabhuji, can you move the translation, please? Namely, okay, our sense of perception. So I'll say this line again. Our senses of perception and of action. That is to say, five perceptive senses: hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, as well as our five senses of action, namely hands, legs, speech, evacuation organs, and reproductive organs, and also our three subtle senses, namely mind, intelligence, and ego. That is 13 in total, in all senses in all, are supplied to us by various arrangements of gross and subtle forms of natural energy. And it is equally evident that our objects of perception are nothing but the products of inexhaustible permutations and combinations of the forms taken by natural energy. As this conclusively proves that the ordinary living being has no independent power of perception or of motion, and as we undoubtedly feel our existence being conditioned by nature's energy, we conclude that he who sees is spirit, and that the senses as well as the objects of perception are material. The spiritual quality of the seer is manifest in our dissatisfaction with the limited state of materially conditioned existence. That is the difference between spirit and matter. There are some less intelligent arguments that matter develops the power of seeing and moving as a certain organic development, but such an argument cannot be accepted because there is no experimental evidence that matter has anywhere produced a living entity. Trust no future, however pleasant. Idle talks regarding future development of matter into spirit are actually foolish because no matter has ever developed the power of seeing or moving in any part of the world. Therefore, it is definite that the matter and the spirit are two different identities. And this conclusion is arrived at by the use of intelligence. Now we come to the point that the things which are seen by the little use of intelligence cannot be animate unless we accept someone as the user or director of the intelligence. Intelligence gives one's directions, like some higher authority. And the living being cannot see or move or eat or do anything without the use of intelligence. When one fails to take advantage of intelligence, he becomes a deranged man. And so, living being is dependent on intelligence or the direction of superior being. Such intelligence is all pervading. Every living being has its intelligence, and this intelligence being the direction of some higher authority is just like father giving direction to his son. The higher authority who is present and residing within every individual living being is the super self. Hare Krishna. So we had discussed this yesterday, I think, up till here, and Atul Prabhu, Abhiram Gopal Das Prabhu had very nicely explained how this purport. So I don't think we need to go too much into it, but kind of in summary, basically, there is super self inside everyone, and we are trying. Prabhupada is giving very clear arguments as to why and how, and based upon this shloka, that based upon the intelligence, if we use our intelligence, even little intelligence, it is very clear that the super soul is um, inside every living entity, and we are, when we when I say I, is the jiva and not really this body. So another example which is um, which also is used in this context is like we see our picture when we are 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, and we keep saying, even though that body has changed so much, we keep saying this is me. So what is so that me that has not changed, that me is the jiva. So we identify as basically the jiva, and that jiva doesn't change. The body changes so much that you can't even make out. If you see the newborn baby and the older person, you can hardly make out that it is the same person, but that person still identifies with that picture of his newborn when he was a newborn. So that is another example where it is very clear that we are not this body, we are the self. And then Prabhupada is giving so many examples how we can use our intelligence to really perceive the presence of super soul. And without the super soul, the body is just dead matter. And once dead body, once the soul leaves the body, that the body just remains as dead matter. There is really nothing. There's no effulgence in it. Can't move. Once the jiva leaves, there is nothing inside. The dead body cannot move or do any kind of activities. All those senses that were mentioned, those karma indriyas and jnana indriyas, they can't really work. And everything, including the mind, the subtle body, leaves with that. So yes, we can, I think, go ahead, unless other there are any other comments or corrections, please. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for reading and sharing. So anybody else would like to share anything? So Prabhuji, would you like to read the next paragraph, or maybe we should ask somebody else?
I can read Prabhuji.
If not, go ahead.
So far as common sense is concerned, we come to the conclusion that there are three identities.
Mataji, the one above
Oh, okay.
at this point.
Yes. At this point in our investigation, we may consider the following question. On the one hand, we realize that all our perceptions and activities are conditioned by arrangements of material nature. Yet we also ordinarily feel and say, I am perceiving or I am doing. Therefore, we can say that our material senses of perception and action are moving because we are identifying the self with the material body. And that the superior principle of super self is guiding and supplying us according to our desire. By taking advantage of the guidance of super self in the form of intelligence, we can either continue to study and to put into practice our conclusion that I'm not this body, or we can choose to remain in the false material identification, fancying ourselves to be the possessors and doers. Our freedom consists in orienting our desire either towards the ignorant material misconception or the true spiritual conception. We can easily attain to the true spiritual conception by recognizing the super self, Paramatma, to be our friend and guide, and by dovetailing our intelligence with the superior intelligence of Paramatma. The super self and the individual self are both spirit, and therefore the super self and the individual self are both qualitatively one and distinct from matter. But the super self and the individual self cannot be on an equal level, because the super self gives direction or supplies intelligence, and the individual self follows the direction, and thus actions are performed properly. The individual is completely dependent on the direction of the super self, because in every step the individual self follows the direction of the super self in the matter of seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, willing, etc. Shall I read the next one also, Prabhuji, or just summarize this one?
Up to you, Mataji.
Prabhuji, let me summarize, because many points in this one. So in this paragraph, Prabhupada is saying, so what basic thing is that he's saying is that I'm not this body, I'm the soul, right? But one may think, why do we have to keep reminding ourselves, right? We keep hearing about this verse after verse from Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. But this is the very important thing, because we say, oh, we are devotees, we are practicing devotional service, or we are sadhakas, but we are still very much in bodily or material identification, right? So that is our main problem. And analogy given for this is, let me back up a little bit more. So what happens is the Jivatma is living in this body, right? It is not a doer. Just like super soul, just like Bhagwan, there is no work for Jivatma to do. It doesn't have to, like I say, I'm a doctor, but really I'm not a doctor. The body is the doctor, right? So I can either know be in this bodily identification and think that I am the doctor, and just make that my goal and only aim of life, and work extra hard towards that, and become, powerful, successful, famous, rich, whatever, right? Devote all my hours and energy into just that, because that is my bodily identification, and the jiva is also starting to identify with that. So jiva also starts believing that this is me, this body, and whatever body's identification is me. Like Krishna has mentioned this very, very nicely in chapter 13 that we are reading. Actually, that mentions the difference between the spirit and matter, the kshetra and kshetragya, very, very nicely. That there is no work for the soul to be done. There is no suffering for the soul, actually. Whatever suffering is happening is because of its bodily identification. So, like, I'll give the analogy. For example, when we are in a movie, right? We are watching the movie, and there are all these things happening on the screen where somebody is getting killed, or somebody is hurting someone, and we are, hurting. We are wincing. We are crying with them. We are hurting as well. But is anybody really hurting us, or is that even that person getting really hurt? No, it is just our identification with those people is so strong. We have come to believe that those people are real, that we are identifying very strongly with them. So we are also feeling the hurt and pain, or joy, or when there is laughter, we are also laughing. When there is emotions, whatever emotions are being displayed, we are also feeling those emotions. But actually none of that is true. Yet we have identified so strongly with those characters that we are feeling all those things. So similarly, Jivatma doesn't have to suffer. It doesn't suffer, actually. When body goes through any kind of, let's say, distress or happiness, or disease or pain, anything good or bad, the jiva is completely aloof from that. Jiva is completely aloof from that. Yet jiva is suffering because of its bodily identification, right? Or like another analogy is given of a dream. Like when you are in a dream, somebody is cutting your head, or whatever. Um, like, so you wake up in terror. You wake up in terror thinking that this is happening to you, but actually nothing has happened to you. You are completely fine, but you were so strongly engaged in that dream that you actually thought that somebody was hurting you. So in similar way, jivatma is so entangled with the body, so strongly identifying with the body, that it is thinking it is the doer, it is the body, it is the possessor of all the things that body is doing. And here Prabhupada is saying, fancying ourselves to be the possessors and doers. So he's saying we can either choose to remain in this false material identification, or be in the spiritual conception. So we can either stay materially, bodily conscious, or in true Krishna consciousness. So if we are detached, if we are truly in our proper position as Jivatma, aloof, right, then we will just do our prescribed duty that body is supposed to do, and connect to Krishna, connect to Paramatma as much as possible. So in the second half of this paragraph, Prabhupada is saying that how can we attain that spiritual conception? By letting Paramatma guide us. So, there is this, as you understand the chariot analogy, right? That senses should be controlled by mind should be controlled by intelligence should be controlled by Jivatma. And then Jivatma should be controlled by the Paramatma, right? Paramatma is also residing in the body, right? To guide us. Like that analogy of the birds is given. The bird is eating, one bird is eating the fruit, the other bird is looking at it. But if this bird that's eating the fruit just looked at the other bird who's Paramatma will be able to guide him. But he's not looking at him. He's not taking his guidance, his intelligence. So he's using his own intelligence, which is contaminated. So it is, so that is why Prabhupada is saying, Paramatma is our friend and guide, and by dovetailing our intelligence with the superior intelligence of Paramatma, we can be in spiritual conception. So then he's saying that, so most of the problems are happening because of, we know that because of the bodily identification. That is why we are suffering. We are letting our intelligence help us during the situations of distress or happiness, and we are completely dependent on our own efforts and intelligence to help us through, instead of taking the guidance of the Paramatma. But if whoever takes shelter of that Paramatma, whoever takes the guidance of the Paramatma, then Paramatma will give the correct intelligence, and that person will be situated in Krishna consciousness, not in the bodily consciousness. So that's what I understood from this, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else would like to share any points? Mataji, you want to continue with the last paragraph?
Yes, sure, Prabhuji. So far as common sense is concerned, we come to the conclusion that there are three identities, namely matter, spirit, and super spirit. Now, if we go to the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedic intelligence, we can further understand that all three identities, namely matter, individual spirit, and the super spirit, are all dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The super self is partial representation or plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavad Gita affirms that the Supreme Personality of Godhead dominates all over the material world by his partial representation only. God is great, and he cannot be simply an order supplier of the individual selves. Therefore, the super self cannot be a full representation of the Supreme Self, Purushottama, the absolute personality of Godhead. Let me read this line again. The God is great, and he cannot be simply an ordered supplier of the individual selves. Therefore, the super self cannot be a full representation of the Supreme Self, Purushottam, the absolute personality of Godhead. Realization of the super self by the individual self is the beginning of self-realization. And by the progress of such self-realization, one is able to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by intelligence, by the help of authorized scriptures, and principally by the grace of Lord. The Bhagavad Gita is the preliminary conception of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the further explanation of the science of Godhead. So if we stick to our determination and pray for the mercy of the director of intelligence sitting within the same bodily tree, like a bird sitting with another bird, as explained in the Upanishads, certainly the purport of the revealed information in the Vedas becomes clear to our vision. And there is no difficulty in realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. The intelligent man, therefore, after many births of such use of intelligence, surrenders himself at the lotus feet of Vasudeva, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.19. Okay, so in this one, Prabhupada is further continuing. So a knowledgeable person, right, self-realized person understands these three identities, these three things: matter, spirit, and super spirit. So the first thing is to understand that we are not this body, we are different from matter. There is matter and spirit. And then to understand that there is spirit and super spirit or super soul within this body. That spirit has to take the guidance of super spirit or super soul. Then Prabhupada is saying that all these three things are dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because even super soul is a plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We understand that from our previous discussions, that basically, super soul is an expansion from Shirodaksha Vishnu expands and enters as super soul into everything. It's super soul is basically in every living entity, non-living, moving, non-moving, everything. Super soul enters like consciousness in this material world, right? So just like there is a soul, which is the consciousness of this body, super soul is like the consciousness of this whole Vishwa. That's why it's also referred to as Vishwatma. So in this way, the super soul is also dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because Supreme Personality of Godhead does not, he's aloof. He's not carrying the burden of this material world or conducting help this world according to our desires and things like that. He lets his expansions of his expansions, his plenary portions and portions of his plenary portions do that job. So this part of the job is done by Shirodaksha Vishnu. Like this line that I was reading, God is great, so he cannot be simply an order supplier of the individual self. So this super soul that is guiding us is helping us based on our desires, right? Sanctioning those desires. So that is not really, God is too great to do those things. It is his expansion that is doing that. So even the super soul is dependent on Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is so whoever understands this all these basic things, and realization of Paramatma within us is the beginning of self-realization. So he's saying these are basic things. This is where the self-realization starts. When a person realizes that he's not the body, he's not the only knower of the body, there is a super knower within the body known as super self or super soul, and that we should take his guidance in conducting our life, then that is the beginning of self-realization. That is the knowledge given in Bhagavad Gita. And then when that person has faith and conviction in this understanding and tries to realize the Paramatma, then slowly he will also be able to realize the Supreme Person himself, Krishna himself, because Paramatma will give intelligence, and plus he will start becoming spiritually inclined, knowing that he's not this body, knowing that the knowledge of Paramatma is the perfect knowledge to understand. So he will start taking the guidance of Guru Sadhu Shastra, right, of the authorized scriptures. And then he will also get mainly the mercy of the Lord. Without grace of Lord, nothing is possible. So the Lord will also start revealing himself to that jiva. So he will get more further understanding of the Supreme Person himself, the Supreme Person who conducts pastimes and who has his associates, right, who has so many, we understand name, form, qualities, pastimes, entourage, everything. So then we start understanding those aspects of the Supreme Person. So that knowledge is further given in Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Prabhupada is giving that analogy of the bird again from the Upanishads, that we have to depend on that Paramatma, who's the director of the intelligence. Pray for his mercy. And this verse 7.19 is quoting that then such a man will have no difficulty in realizing the Supreme Person Vasudeva himself. So that's what I understand, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you so much for reading and sharing. Great. So anybody else would like to add anything? Any points? I think it's 2 more shlokas in this chapter, right? So maybe at least one more we can do today.
Hare Krishna. I was just thinking, Prabhuji, that when we are reading this, that we are reading the 13th chapter right now. And it sounds like a lot of the same information is from the 13th chapter, the Kshetragya Vibhag Yoga. And Arjuna asks, what are the 6 things? So it talks about the who is the real knower, who is the what is to be known, all those 6 things. And so it sounds like this is description of the similar thing here mentioned. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes. Nice. So we'll go to 36th. So who would like to recite the shloka?
I can read it.
I can read. Prabhuji.
Yes.
Somebody said, yeah. No, Prabhuji, Hans Prabhu, go ahead.
No, he'll read the translation. You want to, anybody wants to recite the shloka? Suresh, do you want to recite the shloka?
Yeah, I can say. Tasmat sarvatmana rajan.
Tasmat sarvatmana rajan.
Hari sarvatra sarvada.
Hari sarvatra sarvada.
Prutapya kirti vascha.
Shrotavya kirtikavyascha.
Smratyabhyo bhagavan rita nam.
Smartavyo bhagavan pranam. Okay, now Ansh will read.
Yeah, Prabhuji, go ahead.
O king, it is therefore estimated that
Essential.
is essential that every human being hear about, glorify and remember the Super Lord, the Supreme Person, Lord, the personality of Godhead, always and everywhere.
Thank you so much.
I can read the next.
You can read the purport a little bit.
Yeah, like the
Till here.
yeah, till Srila Sukadev Goswami begins this verse with the word tasmat or therefore, because in the previous verse he has already explained that here is no auspicious means of salvation other than the sublime process of Bhakti Yoga. The Bhakti Yoga process is practiced by the devotees in different methods like hearing, chanting, remembering, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, worshipping and praying, rendering service in love, becoming friendly, and offering all that one may possess.
Thank you. Suresh Prabhuji, you want to continue?
Sure, Prabhuji.
All 9 methods.
Yeah. So, all 9 methods are bona fide methods, and either all of them, some of them, or even none, one of them can bring about the desired results for the sincere devotee. But out of all 9 different methods, the first one, namely hearing, is the most important function in all the processes of Bhakti Yoga. Without hearing sufficiently and properly, no one can make any progress by any of the methods of the practice. And for hearing only, all the Vedic literature are there compiled by authorized person like Vyasdev, who is the powerful incarnation of Godhead. And since it has been ascertained that the Lord is the super soul of everything, he should therefore be heard and glorified everywhere and always. This is the special duty of the human being. When a human being gives up the process of hearing about all pervading personality of Godhead, he becomes victim of hearing rubbish transmitted by man-made machines. Machinery is not bad because throughout the machine one can take advantage of hearing about the Lord, but because machinery is used for ulterior purposes. It is creating rapid degradation in the standard of human civilization. It is said that it is incumbent upon the human beings to hear, because of the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam are made for that purpose. Living beings other than human beings have no ability to hear such Vedic literatures. If human society gives itself to the process of hearing the Vedic literature, it will not become a victim to impious sounds vibrated by impious men who degrade the standard of total society. Hearing is solidified by the process of chanting. One who has perfect heard from the perfect sound become convinced about the pervading personality of Godhead and thus become enthusiastic in glorifying the Lord. All the great Acharya like Ramanuja, Madhava, Chaitanya, Saraswati, Thakur are even in other countries, Muhammad, Jesus Christ and other have extensively glorified the Lord by chanting always and in every place, because the Lord is all pervading. It is essential to glorify Him always and everywhere. In the process of glorifying the Lord, there should be no restriction of the time and space. It is said, this is called Sanatan Dharma or Bhagavad Dharma. Sanatan means eternal, always and everywhere. Bhagavata means pertaining to Bhagwan and the Lord. The Lord is the master of all time and all space, and therefore the Lord's holy name must be heard, glorified, and remembered everywhere in the world. That will bring about the desired peace and prosperity so eagerly awaited by the peace of the world. The word Cha includes all the remaining process of the methods of the Bhakti Yoga, as mentioned above. So this is very important. Here the Prabhupada has explained, and in the previous verse we discussed how, I mean, it is very important for the human beings to listen about, to hear about the Lord, to listen always about the Lord's. Like, and here they explain like the Srila Sukadeva Goswami is saying that Tasmat means therefore. He has already explained there is no auspicious means of the salvation and sublime of Bhakti Yoga. Means there is no substitutes of the Bhakti Yoga. Whatever we do, whatever we think, everything related to Bhakti Yoga. It's not other than Bhakti. If you are not following the process of the Bhakti, then you are going to lose the boat. So that's why it has been explained very well here. We have to always follow the 9 process of the devotional service, like the everyone knows. I mean, the 9 process of the devotional service. We have the sloka also: the Sravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padsevanam, Acharam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. So then, and chant. I mean, the first one, hearing the Sravanam, is the most important, because right now we are following the same what Maharaj Parikshit did. Maharaj Parikshit, he knows that he is going to die in 7 days. So then he started hearing the glorifying, I mean, glories of the Lord. So he continuously hearing the glories of the Lord for 7 days non-stop, I mean, without any break. So then that's what the hearing is so powerful. And every time we talk, and Prabhupada explains so nicely everywhere, and that is keep reminding everywhere that hearing is the most important. There is no other sublime process other than hearing in the Bhakti Yoga. If you want to progress in the spiritual, then hearing is very much important. Hearing means, and here it's explained also, like hearing means the always hearing of Lords, not anything else. I mean, the like Arjuna asked to Krishna, what are the characteristics of the devotee, what they eat and how they walk and what they talk, and what are the 4 different qualities of the devotees in second chapter. So then it's always, 4, whenever they eat, whatever they talk, however they walk, whenever they open their mouths, they will glorify the Lord's. In the same way here it has been explained, hearing is always glorifying the Lord's, hearing about the Lord's, not about the news like it's Ukraine versus Russia or something is going on. So this is all machinery, this is all material things, we should avoid it. And Prabhupada always said the TV is like the idiot box. So we should be away from, keep yourself away. We should not focus more on the televisions or any other media for the sense gratifications. And here all the great acharya like Ramanujam, Madhvacharya, Chaitanya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Swasti Siddhanta Thakur, and even other like Muhammad, Sir, Jesus Christ and other are glorified by Lord by the chanting itself. So then we should be always chanting, because this is our Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan means eternal, and we have to glorify the Lord Bhagwan. Bhagwan is the all pervading. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for reading and sharing. Very nice. So, always and everywhere glorify, remember, and hear about the Lord. This is very nice. Anybody else would like to share any points? So out of the 9 processes, first step is the hearing process. And is the most important process. And all the great acharyas, they also emphasized by giving so many scriptures. So it's more than 9. So I think we'll conclude for today. And I think last shloka, tomorrow we should be able to, complete the chapter. We'll end here. Kanthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra and then conclude.